right, if everybody will find your seat, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, for this next session, my good friend here, Julie Baker, is going to be the moderator. Julie and I have known each other for a long time, and she is absolutely wonderful and she's the best part of spina bifida transition.
It always helps when you have a good handoff, right? It always helps when you have a good handoff. And I think the important part that you can gain from everything that you've seen today is that the pediatric communication, right? Whether it's pediatric to adult, whether it's specialist to primary care, if everybody's communicating, then there's less gaps to fall through, okay? I'm Julie Baker. I'm a nurse at the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at UAB. I'm the Adult Spina Bifida Clinic coordinator. And then I get the privilege of going to STEP Clinic once a month with my doc that you guys met earlier, and coming over here to United Ability once a month. So somebody said, I see you everywhere. Yeah, you do. I'm kind of all over the place. First thing I want to do, I know you guys have seen me back there with the food, is we want to make sure that we give our thanks to the Nicolau family who made the donation today for us to do this and provided that lunch. So we want to make sure they're not here today, but you guys are watching, thank you. So a common thing that you've heard my colleagues say today is, well, ask us, tell us, you're the experts, you're the experts. So that's the title of this panel, is Ask the Experts. So I am going to pass this along to these experts so they can tell us a little bit about who they are. I know you've already met a couple friends, and then what their key components to transition and keynotes that they would want you to know are, and then we'll get into some deeper questions, because it's more than, even though I'm the nurse, it's more than just medical, right? All right, friend.
So hello again, I'm McCartney Hagar. I'm a student at UAB. I'm an anchor for Alabama Care, so that's why I'm here.
Shout out to Alabama.
Yes, shout out to Alabama Care, please follow us. And I also use STEP Clinic and the Sale Weaver program. So I'm all in on the services we're talking about today, and I would love to share some of the progress I've made along with these services and what I've been able to accomplish in my community.
All right, well, hello again. I won't say much, but I am here to help today and try to answer any questions you may have. I'm an attorney and a PhD. Don't shoot me, but I do think that education is a great equalizer, and the more educated you can become and knowledgeable, and I rely on partnerships. What I do, I may not have the answer, but hopefully I know somebody else that does, and so we all work together here. Everybody on this panel, everybody in this field are all partners with each other. And it's a small world in the disability community. And so again, we do rely on each other as a resource and working together. Thank you again for letting me be here.
So hello everybody, my name is Glenda Russo, and I'm a parent of a young adult with a disability. And I also work at UAB for several different grant-funded programs. They're training programs for graduate students. But alongside the graduate students, my role is the family faculty, and I have trainees that are self-advocates or family members to pay for paid internships with the other graduate students, like psychology, nutrition, occupational therapy. So not necessarily a job, but an internship for people with disabilities. So I guess that's kind of a transition part too. So I agree with Graham wholeheartedly about education, and that's part of it. We also have a Partners in Policy program that we started this year too, for family members and people with disabilities to learn more about leadership and policy and how that affects their lives.
I'm Phillip Crain. I just finished my second master's, the Master's of Public Administration from Troy University in March. And along with that, I got a certificate in Public Health Administration. And in doing that degree, my main focus is disability and access to healthcare. And so finishing that program, Betsy actually contacted me and said, I want to work with you. And so I'm hoping to work, if Betsy can get HR figured out at UAB, which being slow as an iceberg. But that I'm hoping to get involved with the STEP clinic and working with that transition process. We know there's so many issues with disability and access to healthcare for disabled people, numerous statistics, and how the fact that access to healthcare impacts other, aspects of life. And so if we can solve one problem or at least make a dent in it, then we can kind of work on the other stuff too.
Hi, my name is Jermaine Long, and I'm the founder of Caroline's Garden. I am new to the STEP clinic. Thank you. I had I brought Caroline to clinic for the first time, and I just have to tell you, it was so amazing. So, wow, it was a 10 out of 10 experience. But I was asked to come here today to talk about my experience with guardianship. I did that a few years ago. I looked at my form, it was 2019. I had been hearing Caroline's whole entire life that she had to have an attorney to do the guardianship process, and I did not use an attorney. It was probably the easiest thing I've ever done. So if anybody has questions about guardianship, I have the form here. You just need a stamp and a form. Super easy. So you can just ask me. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Brandon Thomas. I am here like you guys to learn and to give my experience. I have spina bifida. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, but yes, thank you.
Brandon's usually a little longer-winded than that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about getting into the workforce and what kind of struggles you guys face with that. Crain, will you take that on for me?
Definitely. I know a lot of people see me wearing a suit and tie a lot. They think I just crawled out from under a rock and wearing a suit and tie, but I went to college and law school before the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there was a lot of barriers, but a lot of persistence. But to get into the workforce, of course, I utilize vocational rehabilitation services. I mentioned that this morning as a client to help, and they provided a lot of services that helped me be in enough shape where I could work, going to school and getting the background. But once to actually get a law job, though, I went to school at Vanderbilt, was graduated in 1990, and they had placement services on the campus. But I had to I sent out a bunch of resumes. I beat I pound the pavement, that's what they used to say. I pounded the pavement. I threw out a lot of resumes to a lot of different law firms, and I had a phenomenon I'd never heard of before. I actually got rejection letters from law firms that I didn't even send resumes to. We call that a stray bullet, okay? You never expect it. So I have been rejected, I've been turned down, but once I had an opportunity, they said, look, we think it'd be great to get you into a courtroom in a wheelchair in these cases where people are trying to say they're injured, they're suffering all these issues. You get in front of a jury in a wheelchair and you're defending a case on personal injury, and basically they can't argue with that. The jury will look at me using a wheelchair, look at the guy that's complaining about a hurt thumb, and not have a lot of sympathy for him, okay? So the idea is to use your disability as an advantage. And also, if there's something with your disability that you think might be a problem getting hired, go ahead and mention that, explain it. And they said, they looked at me, and this will be the last part of my story, but they looked at me in the law firm and they said, well, you're going to have to go around all these courthouses around the state, and you can't drive a car, you're using a wheelchair. And I said, wait a minute, okay? I said, come on out to the parking lot, let me show you how I transfer into my car and how I drive with hand controls to get my chair out of the car. They said, okay, you're hired. And then that experience, success begets success. That's something in getting a job is not only having the education and everything, but also having the experience. Everybody has to have a certain amount of experience. You get one job, you build up the ability to what I call work hardening. You know, go to work early in the morning, work all day, every day, 5 days a week. You know, you have to have stamina, and that's something that people with disabilities, that's a stereotype, that we don't have stamina. I'm telling you, I have more stamina. I've been through a lot of stuff using a wheelchair and having the conditions that go along with a spinal cord injury. There's a lot of hidden stuff. You know, we make it look easy using wheelchairs and other things. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but people with disabilities are steadfast and determined and have stamina. So the moral of that story is, and maybe a lot of examples, is to really not give up. Get out there, be proactive, get an education, get experience where you can, and develop not only your knowledge, but your soft skills. People have to have soft skills too, interrelating and interacting with people. So anyway, it's not possible. It can be done. And people say, well, you got all these advantages. I didn't. I had to claw my way up, and it was determination, just being plain out stubborn. And you can do that too. So thank you.
I said I'm going through it. Going through the job process now. I've finished 2 masters and done all that. I do know from my own experience that there definitely is that you see the look when you roll in the room, when you roll in the interview room. It's the look that every interviewer, every teacher, every college professor, it's like, oh crap, this person's got in a wheelchair, and it's universal. It's just like, what am I going to do with this? And then you're sitting there going, did you not read my resume? Did you not have no knowledge of prior knowledge before I rolled in here? So there definitely is that issue, and he mentioned it before, of kind of having to fight the stigma of being in a wheelchair, having a disability, any of that, because there is that perception from society that the disability inherently makes you less qualified to be an employee. So that's kind of been my experience.
I just want to say something real quick. It's funny what you said is when my daughter rolled into Sanford, we got that look. Even just to tour the campus, they were like, what are we going to do with her? They were like, we can't put you in the golf cart and roll you around. So it's different, but it's not that they give you the look, but if you tell them what you need and you can break it down where it's doable, then they can understand it better and they go, oh, okay, I can do that. So that does help sometimes.
It's funny you mentioned Sanford. When I was looking at colleges way back in 2010, and I went to Sanford just to check it out, and I realized it is not accessible at all for a wheelchair user who's a manual wheelchair user, because if you've never been to Sanford's campus, it's on a giant hill. They're a private institution, so they don't bother with cutouts very frequently. And they're at the time, none of their dorms were accessible either. And so they called my house and they go, we want you to be the first manual wheelchair user in either Sanford's history or 20 years to go to our campus for undergrad. And I'm like, I'm not going to be your guinea pig.
We were.
Well, yeah. So,
in 2010.
Yeah. So yeah. So they call me. We want you to be the guinea pig. Nope. Somebody else can be the guinea pig. So way to go.
I'm just going to say a funny story. My husband works at Sanford. No, I mean, this is good. This is funny. He's actually on his second round at Sanford. When we were dating, we met. My husband worked at Sanford. He stayed there 5 or 6 years. This was before I had Caroline. My daughter's 21, has never walked, never talked. She's in a wheelchair. So he left Sanford to go to corporate America. COVID brought him home. Anyway, he's now back at Sanford. So the first time we went to have lunch with him at Sanford, when I had Caroline, I'm like, you've got to be hey, because, I have to push her. There's nothing. So, yeah, 100%. I told my husband, I'm like, you got some work to do here. That's not even his department, of course, but it is on a mountain. And I'm telling you, it's like Everest when you are pushing the big wheelchair. So, yeah, thank you.
So I can talk about this all day. I have a podcast and I talk about just living with this disability. So a lot of people see my resume. I've been in the security field for almost 12 years. I have the highest clearance level that you can have. I have the top secret SCI. And they see my resume and it's like, yes, oh, we want him. And then I get in there and I walk in there and they're like, oh, well, we thought we wanted him. So, like I said, I've been doing it for almost 12 years. And recently I was going to take a deployment job over into Germany, and I got to the training camp, and everybody's kind of giving me weird looks, but I'm used to weird looks. But we got to the medical department, and they started giving us our immunizations or whatever, and they let everybody else go to the back, and then they called me to the side, and they're like, hey, well, we really don't know what to do with you. So we're gonna have to send you back home. And I'm like, I've disclosed to you guys I have spina bifida, like we had talked about this multiple times, but okay, whatever, I'll go back home. But I said that to say, like, it's trying to get a job and having a disability, and I know for me walking, I know, came in with a wheelchair, you guys might, get the look, the same look I get. So it's pretty hard, it really is, but you gotta stay focused, and I'm back with another company trying to get another deployment job, so we'll see how this goes.
I haven't had that much trouble as far as employment because I work for 2 different disability organizations, and they tend to be pretty understanding. I work for Alabama Care, and this summer I'll be starting working with Camp Basket. They're a great organization, and I wish they were here. But I think one of my biggest struggles has actually been college. I know the look very well. I remember I'm in the honors college doing the global and community leadership program because I really want to get involved in activism for the disability community. And I remember my tour, my virtual tour because COVID, I asked that we got a tour of the dorms, and the leader, who was also a student, I asked in the chat, I said, well, can I see an ADA room? Can I see an accessible dorm? Because there's no way I can get in that shower, I can't reach anything. And they looked at me like a deer in headlights, like, people in wheelchairs are in the honors college? I had not foreseen this. It was such a thing. And I also asked multiple questions about accommodations, like, how do people with chronic illnesses, because I also have a very debilitating invisible disability as well, how do you manage the extra workload with your health and also your mental health? And all I got in response was links to the Disability Services Office as my response. So I think that especially in these spaces are sort of gatekept from us, employment and higher education. When you get there, no one's expecting you, and so when they see you, it's sort of a panic. It's like, what am I supposed to do with this? These people don't go here, that's not how it works. And it's very unfortunate, and it also, it made the beginning of my college experience a little isolating because I almost felt people have this sort of misconception that marginalized people can enter these spaces through like a diversity quota. It's like, oh, you're the one in the wheelchair, they must have done this for publicity or done this because, it's good optics for them. And I've definitely received a lot of comments like that, remarks about, they've got to have the girl in the wheelchair for the ad or so on and so forth. So I think that people really underestimate how hard and how resilient, like you said, people with disabilities are, and how much harder we have to work when we're in these somewhat openly hostile environments at times. And it's very unfortunate because I think so many more people have the potential to get higher education, which really does help with these disparities, because you know your rights better after going through these struggles. But it's hard to enter that space and want to stay when you're met with such a cold reception. But I'm still in college, so it's not hopeless. It's just annoying.
Thank you guys. I know this is always kind of a topic that's hard to talk about, but we have to talk about it in order to meet the need, and we have wonderful services that are trying to help bridge those gaps. So thank you guys for that. We still have a little bit of time. Yeah, okay. So let's talk about, if you would, your transition in medical care. So we're talking about transitioning from pediatrics to adult care. I know we've got a couple of step friends up here. So we're going to start with you. You're good with that? We'll just kind of go through. And then moms, if you guys are good with giving your experience too.
Hello again, the depressing one. I actually have good testimony this time. All good, all 5 stars out of 5. Step Clinic has made the transition process so much easier for me. Also working with CRS, I know Jenny's been my caseworker since I was 13, and I have a really great team. Everyone here is on my case. They're working with me all the time, always emailing me, keeping me on task. And so I started thinking about careers and stuff in middle school, because to transition, it's so much more work for us. You can't just show up in a place and say, I have these qualifications, give me a job, or I have these grades, let me go to your school, because there's this whole other element. And with medical things, it's even worse. I was really fortunate to have a great primary care, like pediatrician as a kid. I have 2 rare disorders, very rare, and he did the work, he learned all about them. He advocated for me, and my parents were young, and he did his best to help us in every way he could. But I was really scared of transitioning, because I thought, wow, I have such a great support system, I don't want to lose this. And even now, I'm seeing the same orthopedic surgeon as I was when I was an infant, because there's no specialist for my disability. But with Step Clinic, I have so many fewer appointments because I see all of my services at one time. And it's much more accessible to me that way. I'm missing less school. That helps with my caregivers, my grades, things like that. And also, having doctors that have dealt with disability before. One thing that Phillip touched on was that there are some biases and disparities against people with disabilities. So when you get into a sort of setting where if your doctor isn't familiar with your condition, there's all these misconceptions and all these assumptions. And with Step Clinic, they see just about everything. And I know other patients that go there, we're like a little family. So it's been actually it's much less scary than I thought it would be. I was worried in early high school, but once Step opened, I was one of the first patients, and it's been a really a life-changing experience, not even exaggerating. It's so nice to have competent, disability-focused care. I feel safe in a medical setting, which can be hard to do after growing up with so many appointments, and it's stressful, but I feel at home at Step, and my mental health is better. I'm getting great comprehensive services for that. My chronic pain is being managed much better than it ever has. I have access to physical therapy, which is really hard at my age, and with all of my responsibilities, working that in. So 10 out of 10, I love Step Clinic. That's all I know about medical transition. Just go to Step Clinic. I have no other advice. I will bet Dr. Stein cake.
You heard my comment before that the 80s weren't that long ago, so mine has more, because I was 17 when I was injured, so I was already transitioning into the world of adult medical care. But all of my doctors that I started out with, Dr. Keith Lloyd, who was my urologist, when I was 17, I saw him for the last 39 years. Well, he's retired. So that's something else you have to talk about in medical care transition, because we want people with disabilities to have normal lifespans. And so you deal with specialists, and the specialists that you deal with, they're going to retire sometime. And trying to find another specialist that can replace them can be a challenge. So right now, And even my doctor at Spain Rehab, I had Dr. Sam Stover, and then I had Dr. Amy Jackson, who remarried as Dr. McClain. Well, now she's retired from Spain. So I'm without a doctor right now, a physical rehabilitation medicine, a physiatrist doctor. So that's something to think about. And our medical care system does need to address that. So that's really my spin on the medical care.
So, my young adult daughter, we did go attend we are in the STEP clinic right now. She was in Alabama. She left for a few years to work out of state. And the model of that healthcare where she landed was a lot different, but it's a great model. And maybe we can bring some of that model to help with children. So I will talk with them about what we learned there. But now she's back in Alabama in the STEP clinic and going through that and trying to find adult care. And her condition is different than I think some other people up here. And that was the nice thing that Betsy said. It's like, we're not going to turn anyone away. We're not going to be strict just spina bifida or strict this. We're going to take everybody in. So we're still looking for the perfect handoff to the adult physicians in the community. And it's a work in progress, and that's why we have the STEP clinic. That's why they're here. That's the whole purpose of it. We're so thankful that they're doing all of this. Another hard part is there's a treatment for what my daughter has, but it's one of the highest ones in the country or the world because it's brand new. So the treatments that's another part of the aspect too, of trying to find a physician and trying to find the treatment from the children to the adults because they are living longer and it's different. It's like they didn't have to have the knowledge before. So it's ever changing. I encourage you, we're talking about education, I encourage you to go to med school. Talk about barriers. They'll give some looks because they do it now. There's nobody in medicine. Wouldn't it be great to have someone with a disability be your medical provider at that level? To see more of them. I know there are some, but I encourage. Right, but we need more. We need more. So would you like another degree?
No, my dad is a physician, pulmonary critical care, and he knows from an early age that I am not going to med school. I watched him have way too many long nights on call, and nope, not for me. Now I approach the transition aspect from two specific areas. First, personal experience. So I remember when I was 9 or 10 years old, and my pediatric physical therapist looked at me and goes, "Be prepared. The medical community is not prepared for you." Said, "They're not prepared for any of you. Y'all are living longer. You're going to be adults, and the medical community is not prepared to take care of you." At 9 or 10 years old, that was, that's kind of a flashbulb memory. It sticks with me. I said it's something that as I continue to age and grow and move into school and go into and be interested in public health, I keep coming back to that memory. The medical community is not prepared for you. So then approaching it from a public health perspective, we know that CDC data says that 33% of adults with disabilities ages 18 to 44 do not have a primary care physician. We know that adults with disabilities have 9 times higher hospitalization usage, and that medical costs for people with disabilities is 5 times higher. So there's clearly a need for medical understanding of adults with disabilities, whether it's from pediatric or from a physical therapy standpoint, or from a preventative care, or from the medical side. So we know that's a problem. Now, you spoke on having representation within the medical community. I'll never forget, several years ago, I received care from United Ability for a backup pump for a number of years, for 25 years basically, through Dr. Charlie Law. But one of the last times that I went there with my pump, because it had to be removed for other reasons, Dr. Law had a resident at the time, and that resident was in a wheelchair. And he rolled in the room, and I went, "Hey, medical medical student in a wheelchair doing my pump refill. And Dr. Wall always let the students do mine because I'd had it for 25 years, and I could tell them what they were doing wrong. But anyways, the student started to do the refill, and he realized that Dr. Wall realized he couldn't move with this. Once he put the sterile area around the pump to do the refill, he was now stuck because he couldn't touch his wheels to move to get the baclofen that he had yet to, the baclofen vial to fill to refill the pump. So he was stuck. He was like, what do I, and so Dr. Law was like, we need to think about this. And so Dr. Law, of course, helped him at the time. But he did. He said that was really eye-opening, even for him, because he was like, I never thought about the fact that if you're in a chair, you have to touch your wheels to go across the room, or move across the room. But whereas Dr. Wall could just step. And he said, I don't have to touch anything that's not sterile, but if you're in a chair, you do. So it's it's stuff like that where adaptations and accommodations come into play. But it was very cool one of those last visits for that student to be in there in a chair.
So Caroline is 21, and she was born at Brookwood Hospital. So we grew up at Children's Hospital. So it was terrifying to leave. I mean, I know so many that had, moved to Birmingham perhaps, and they'd been in other health, places, but born and raised at Children's. So when, the closer she got to 21, it was terrifying. I mean, I did not, Caroline's little. I mean, she doesn't look 21. She's tiny, and I'm like, you're really not gonna kick us out, are you? Yeah, they really are. So, I mean, I don't mean that ugly. I'm friends with all of them. I have their cell phones, and yeah, we talk all the time. But they did start that conversation with me last year. I think COVID, we may have had it earlier, but COVID just changed so many things. But I will tell you, we went in March, and it was, again, a 10 out of 10. I mean, sitting in one room, and the doctors come to you, I mean, I'm sorry, but that's better than going from clinic to clinic on different days. And and in theory, my husband would say, just get all the appointments lined up back to back. Well, it doesn't work that way. So hats off to whoever thought you sit in one room and it's a revolving door. The worst part about it, and I think I said this to Beth, was just the parking deck. I mean, I hadn't been in that Kirkland Clinic parking deck probably in 15 years. No one told me that you needed 45 minutes just to go back up, back up, back up. And I gave up looking for the handicap parking. Forget that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Whatever. And the van that I have for Caroline has the side door. So that's not the best, I wasn't thinking, because then you're really trapped. So you can pass 100 parking places, but I can't get her out. So I'm like, I should have rethought that probably to get the rear. I didn't think about that. So other than the parking, it was just so wonderful. Hats off to everyone who did it. And you brought up the stat, and one thing I learned in my business is that the special needs community is the world's largest minority group. We cannot be ignored. I mean, we just can't. We are the world's largest minority group. And because of the steps that have made up that, and as you said, they are staying longer. They're living longer. I can't tell you how many times Caroline's been on a ventilator, and they told me, I've heard it, just so many times, angels are coming tonight. And Caroline is thriving, and she's doing great. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to support it in any way. I got home from that appointment, and I'm in many special needs groups just in the state of Alabama, and I was just firing away. Oh my gosh, fear no more. This, and that's one thing that I followed up with my doctors a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, you need to tell people that the step clinic is amazing. Not just, here you go, here's your appointment, and best of luck to you. It's a great thing, so it's nothing to fear, and I can't say enough great things about it.
So, I have another take on that. Julie, close your ears. So, I think transitioning from the children to the adult, so my spina bifida, I think is a little different than most people. A lot of people, I walk, I really don't have any other real conditions. I outside of like bladder issues, but I don't know. So when I go to the doctor, they don't know. They're just like, hey, you know, you're living, you're walking, you know, keep on moving. And that's cool, but I really don't have a lot of questions to answer when I go as an adult. I can't really remember much going as a kid. I was a military brat, so we traveled so much, so I don't remember all the time. But it's things that I wish they would have talked about, like fertility. Fertility should have been talked about as a kid, I believe. And now I had to kind of like pry it out of my doctor as I'm, you know, an adult now. And, you know, just fertility, other resources other than physical therapy. I don't really think physical therapy works all the time, especially for men. So it's just a couple of things. Huh?
I said, got a bunch of physical therapists.
I'm sorry, that is true. I'm just speaking from me having spina bifida. I have told my doctor they don't write me a prescription for physical therapy because I'm not going. Because I've been many a times for pain, and I just never come back saying, hey, this works. So I don't know. I'm kind of salty about the transition because not a lot of adults with spina bifida have made it to 32, or I find it rare that, you know, somebody my age has spina bifida and we're, you know, still kicking, still moving. I haven't met a lot of people. I finally met one guy who was like 55, I want to say, or he might be 50, and then I met one lady that was one lady in her 70s, right? So it's not common. It's not, you know, you see a lot of people, older people with spina bifida, so it's kind of hard to go to the doctor and they don't really have answers because they haven't dealt with a lot of people, older people with spina bifida. Aren't you guys the only one in Alabama that deals with, you know, Southeast with spina bifida? So there's no shade to Julie or Dr. Powell. It's just how it is. It is what it is.
Yeah, before we move on, you brought up a really great point. I think with people with disabilities living longer, I think that something that's important is, you know, kids, whenever you see something in the media about disability, or you see a commercial for NBA or some other organization, it's always children. And whenever you see a movie with people with disabilities in it, it's always children. And usually, you know, something tragic happens. But I think it's important even before 12, you know, from the moment your child is born, to keep in mind that they, with the society we live in now, they have a future, and to make sure that they know that, you know, your disability is part of who you are. It's likely going to be forever, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a place in this world, that you don't have an opportunity in a future. And I think also another great point was reproductive health. That's something that there's statistics on that there are very, very few opportunities for, especially women with physical disabilities, to get reproductive health care. And despite the fact that people with disabilities are just as likely to be active in those circles. So I think these are really essential things that get missed because there's a lot of somewhat infantilization of people with disabilities, and the fact that we're not expected to be adults, we're not expected to grow up, and when we do, before things like Step Clinic existed, we were just kind of left out in the dark. It's like, oh, you're still here? Well, that's your problem. But I think things are changing, and it's just important that as these new generations are coming up and people, like younger people with disabilities today, that we show them that, hey, these can be your role models, you know? You're gonna grow up and you're gonna be successful, and you're gonna, you know, you can get married if you want to, you can have a job, you can have an education. All of these things are possible now. And that may not have always been as much the case as it was today, but, you know, just, yeah, this is important, and it's often overlooked. And I feel like I've gotten pretty comprehensive healthcare for like being an adult and stuff. But again, I'm pretty young, so that's all.
Awesome.
Everything you're saying is so disability forward, and until we have that in accepted in spaces and not, segregated in the whole institutional bias thing. It's just, they have to be included so they can learn that they can be just like their peers and they can do whatever their peers are. And we just have to change that culture. And Kyle is, such a big advocate for always wanting the same things, that always wanting more. His favorite word on the device is more. He wants more. He wants more of everything that his peers have. He wants more. So we really need to start at that younger age, like you said. It's so important.
And wanting more is the best way to be. And also, it's so good to see you, Kyle. We go to Camp Aska together, don't we? I recognized you. I'm so happy to see you. Yeah, it's so great when I see people from camp. And going to step clinic is fun too, because I see people from camp. I'm like, hey, how have you been? But yeah, I think always wanting more is a good thing, because we deserve more than what we're getting, even with all the accomplishments that our community has made to make things better. So I'm so excited to be talking with all of y'all. This is so uplifting.
And can I add one more thing about the STEM clinic, but I think would be very helpful for parents to know. For us, we live out at the, 280, we're the 280 families, and what has been a game changer for us is when Kyle has to have his MRI or his CAT scans for his shunt or any type of, that type of assistance, we just pop over to our little Leeds brand new UAB, which you just literally drive up, walk out, walk right into the clinic, and they have the most amazing, their MRI techs and their CAT scan techs are treat Kyle like an adult. They look at him, I'm not even part of the picture. They talk to him, they explain things to him, like they treat him completely like an individual. And then we go to Buc-ee's. So it's like, awesome, right? So we don't have to go down to the world you were talking about.
Parking deck.
I have a secret parking space. I'll have to tell you that.
Ooh, I didn't know.
So I have a little secret Kirkland thing. I'll tell you.
All right.
But yeah, so that leads, outpatient is just awesome. And then Dr. Stein, she just sends the order over to the Leeds clinic, and boom, we're in. You don't have to wait. You just literally drive up, drive out of the van, and drive right on in. It's super cool. Super cool. Very, very accessible.
Yeah, downtown sometimes it's not as accessible as it should be. We can all do that without any question or hesitation. So I think what we've all heard up here so far today is resilience, resilience, resilience. And so I just want to commend you guys for being up here with us today. I'm going to open it up to some questions. But I did want to just say from a medical standpoint, and just like this mom over here pointed out, when they cross over to adult medicine, we are trained to talk to your adult child, to talk to you as an adult. And then your parent is your supplement. Okay, we know that every mama in here has that file in the back of their brain that has every detail of every surgery, but part of owning it is being able to, tell us what you know about your care. So just you're gonna encounter that. So we're always gonna ask the patient first and then ask for the parent to supplement in adult care. So, but we definitely want our caregivers available to fill in any of those gaps. Anybody got questions for our panel? Dr. Ness, we can probably hear her.
I don't need a mic. I'm Jane Ness, I'm the child neurologist, and I recognize some of you. And if I don't recognize you. A couple of things is, so transition starts early. So if you've got a child who can tell us anything, I really emphasize, the kid talks first, and then I reward the parent. It's usually the mom for good behavior and keeping their mouth shut while they let the kid tell a story. But doctors aren't always going to take the time to do that. So then you've got to say, wait, let them tell. Okay, so you can also kind of push us along. Okay, so don't try not to, make your kid do the talking. Make them know what their meds are. Extra credit for the name and the dosage, and how often they take them, and knowing how long a prescription lasts. Does it last only 30 days, or does it last 6 weeks? Just saying, okay? Stuff like that's really helpful to us, okay? But having them practice, okay? The sex talk. Doesn't, we don't get the birds and the bee in one talk. That's a process, okay? And so learning how to transition is a process. But back to sex, one of the best talks I've heard at Children's is actually when Cynthia Wozo, who's a pediatric rehab doctor, I think she's got spastic diplegia, but I don't know because I've never asked her because she's a great doctor and that's really all I care about. But she talked about sexuality in the, for adults who are differently able. And, I think Children's was a little like, wah, because we're trying to say, don't get knocked up. Don't, we talk about sex all the time, or I do in my world, but don't get knocked up, okay? If you get knocked up, you get knocked out, you go to the big house down the street, okay? And that's it. And, we talk about long-acting reversible contraception, but we really don't talk about sex as pleasure. We talk about something you shouldn't do in the young, in a pre-21 age. And that maybe that's probably got to change, but I think that's something where I think that, we're getting there, so be patient with this, but I think it's okay to bring it up, and your kids are going to have sex, okay? They're going to want to have sex whether you want them to have sex or not, okay? So don't let them get knocked up, all right? Until they're ready.
And make sure their meds get changed.
And make sure they're not, right, there's a few of those anticonvulsants, yeah.
So we need to make sure we have those important, difficult conversations with our providers. Like I told you guys, first thing I said this morning was don't be scared to talk to your providers, okay? We're here to help you, the point in physical medicine is we're here to help you be as functional as you can be and, as you want to be. And that's part of functioning as an adult, So don't be scared to have those conversations, to bring them up. I had a patient that came in a couple of weeks ago, and her mom was like, yeah, she needs to have a talk with you, and I'm going to be right out there. I'm like, okay, all right, I got this, So just, to have those conversations. It's not fun for any parent, but just know that we have to have those.
But when having that talk, do we need to, is there something that we can do? Because like I said, I'm 32 and I'm just now finding out that I may have fertility issues because of spina bifida. So is there something that doctors can talk about earlier in the stages so it can be looked at,
Yeah, it should be talked about sooner than 32.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think it's one of those things that everybody's living longer, right? And so more individuals are having more questions, and we may not all have the answers right there for you, but having a team behind you to try and help you figure it out is part of the plan.
Oh, one thing I was going to say to parents, don't count on the school to teach your kid about this stuff. First of all, it's abstinence-only education in Alabama, so they ain't going to know anything. But also, it's definitely not disability inclusive, so none of it applies to us. So, just buckle down and just get through it. Do what you got to do, and just wipe it from your memory afterwards. But it's going to be good. It's going to happen.
Let's say Betsy signed me up for a talk one time at spina bifida camp. Y'all. So just know talks are out there, but the in-depth conversations, we need to have with our urologists, we need to have with our, primary care physicians. And if they don't know, then we need referrals out there. Like I said, sometimes it's not always what one single provider knows. It's that communication, that networking that we have.
Yeah, and I'll say specifically in spina bifida, my eureka moment on this particular topic, Julie and I were in adult clinic together, and a young lady who is very smart, she's in college, and she just got engaged, and Dr. Powell brought up birth control, and she burst into tears and said, "What? You mean I can get pregnant?" And she had been through our whole spina bifida program at Children's and was in college and had no idea, because no one in our clinic had ever told her that she could get pregnant. And so, the most fulfilling part about doing lifespan care and being in that adult clinic is I can see the gaps. And so Jeff Blount and I looked at each other and we were like, we gotta do better. We gotta take this information back to the pediatric clinic. And so actual sexual and reproductive health is what I'm doing my PhD project on. And so I'm gonna, like all of you, I'm gonna be coming to talk to because, yeah, I think it's so important. And just, you know, this part is not unique to Alabama. I was at a national CDC meeting full of urologists, pediatric urologists, and I said, who in here talks to their patients about sexual and reproductive health? And every one of them said, I don't want to talk about that. That shouldn't fall on us. That's rehab. Rehab should be talking about that. And so what we found out is that nationally, no one's talking about this and no one really wants to own it. And so I just worked with the University of Michigan to write a provider toolbox on how to talk about this and make videos. And so we are working on it. We do know that the gap is there, but it is a lot more powerful message hearing you guys say it. And so I'm going to ask Alabama Care to like get snippets for me that I can go and take when we're advocating.
I think Phillip has one more thing for us.
This conversation that we're having about reproductive health cannot ignore what is going on in this country right now. With the repeal of, or the overturning of Roe v. Wade, if it goes through, it is an access and disability rights issue. It cannot be ignored. Yes, uterus having individuals in this country are, but do not forget that disability falls under that umbrella. Because it is still there, we are still there. If we're 26% of the population in the United States have a disability, 13% of them are women. So just by splitting hairs, 50-50. So we cannot forget that disability and reproductive health go hand in hand. That under, due to various social and political and policy problems that the United States currently have, that disability and reproductive health are crucial and have to be talked about and can't be ignored, and that's just reality.
All right.
Also, it's important to remember that people assigned female at birth with disabilities, physical and intellectual, are at a higher risk of abuse in these kinds of reproductive situations. So that adds a whole other layer. It's very unfortunate, but it is the truth. And if we're going to talk about that, then we can't deny that that is also a problem that our community faces. So, which goes hand in hand with what's going on right now. So.
Thank you guys for being here today. Appreciate all of your time.
All right, and we're going to do a sound check real quick before the next session starts. So if you'll give us like 5 minutes to do that.